let's get started. So there was one halacha that we did not speak out fully. It's the halacha about the tarnagolim. Remember about the chickens? That if we saw the case in the Mishnah, the first Mishnah, we saw the case of tarnagolim mu'adim lahalich kedarkon l'shaber. The tarnagolim chickens are considered to be a muad, that they go around and they could break things as they're going around. So it's expected damage. Hayad dalil kashur baraglav. If there was a bucket, some sort of an object that was tied on to a dalil, some sort of an object that's tied on to the chicken's leg. Oshahem mahades. If it was hopping around, Shahayim mahades. Shahayim mahades. Umashaber sakalim, and it breaks the vessels. Mishalim chatzi nezek. So it pays only half damages. All right. So if the something that grabs onto the chicken's leg and then that thing causes damage, so then you're only going to have to pay half damages. So I want to just clarify this halacha a little bit. The best place to go for clarification is the Rambam. So the Rambam, the way he brings down this halacha is as follows, and it's a little different than I think the way that we had assumed last time. He writes the following. He says, "Hatarnagolin mu'adin lahalich kedarkun l'shaver." That chickens, you expect them to, as they're moving around, they could bump into things and cause damage. Hayachut or ritzua, if there was a string or some sort of a ritzua is like a strap. Kashur b'raglehen.
So somebody tied their legs together so they couldn't hop around.
So it was tied onto its legs. V'nistabach kli ba'oso achut. And then, a little different, Charlie, and then a vessel grabbed onto the strap. So there's a strap on the chicken's leg, and then something got caught on the strap. V'nisgagel v'nishbar. And the thing is now being pulled, right? The object is being pulled along. And breaks. Mishalim chatzi nezek. You pay half damages. B'med dvar mamurim, meaning that the owner of the chicken would have to pay half damages. B'med dvar mamurim. Kishikashu adam. Now, what are we talking about over here? In a scenario where someone ties the string to the chicken's foot. Someone ties the string to the chicken's foot.
Not the owner.
Not the owner necessarily, no.
But if the owner did it,
presumably he'd have to pay full damages, I think. Kishikashu adam. But if it just got caught onto its foot, just on its own, right? No one tied it; it just got caught on its foot. Baal hatarnagolin potter. So then the owner of the chicken is going to be off the hook in such a scenario. He's not going to have to pay anything. And if the strap has an owner, and the strap of the string was not hefker, it was not ownerless, it had an owner. So then bal hachut chayev chatzi nezek. Then in this scenario, the owner of the string is going to have to pay for the damages. Shaharihu kabor hamiskago, because it's like a moving bore, a moving hazard. It's like a moving hazard.
Nice.
Okay,
Yeah.
the string became a moving hazard. All right.
But if it's a different person than the owner of
What?
the strap, I mean, so,
I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Why wouldn't it be Aish and not or?
Why would it not be Aish and not bor? I think
Because Aish
because
is moving.
and I know, but Aish has. That's what we said. That was one of the differences between Aish and bor in the Mishnah. That Aish
moves and bor doesn't.
and bor doesn't. Yeah. So what's the difference between a bor, hamaskagel, and Aish? That's a whole discussion. Yeah, that's a very good question. But bottom line is what the Rambam is. So again, there's a few pieces in this Rambam. Let's read it again so we can have clarification. Hayachut or ritzua kasher v'ragleihem. If there's a string or a strap tied to the feet of the chicken, v'nisbach kli ba'oso achut, and then a vessel grabs onto the string, v'niskalgo v'nishbar, and then it breaks because it's being dragged along. So the mishalim chati nezek, you only have to pay half damages. You have to pay half damages though. B'med dvar mamurim. What's the scenario here? Kishikashu adam. If the person came along and tied it. Aval im nikshar al ragleihem me'elav, but if it just came onto its foot on its own, it just got caught on its foot, and then the string grabs the vessel and breaks it, bal hatar negolim pater. Then the owner of the chicken is going to be off the hook in that scenario. Because that's a scenario where it's just like, that's like an onyx. That's something that's just, that's an act of God, okay? That's not due to your negligence. However, if the string has owners, and the chut was not hefker, the string was not hefker, then the owner of the string is going to be liable to pay chatzi nezik, to pay half damages, shaharu kabar hamaskago, because his string became a moving hazard. Okay, so the way that so I saw that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes a very interesting explanation of this Rambam. He writes the following. He says, he says, now we could try it. Let's try to explain the Rambam over here. If someone came along and tied a vessel to the feet, tied an object to the feet of the chicken, that's not called aish, because it's not causing damage on its own. It's only causing damage because the thing was tied to its feet. I think that's the difference. That's the difference. Okay, aish, right, takes on a life of its own. So it's only due to the chicken that it's causing damage. But since this object has become now an extension of the chicken, chashav kitzroros delay. Therefore, it's the same thing as the pebble case. It's the same halach as the pebble case. So the reason you have to pay half damages in these cases is because it's remember we said it's a halach l'mush Sinai. This is just tradition we have from our Sinai, that the pebbles flying up from underneath the chicken's feet are cases of you only have to pay half damages in that case. So too the owner of the delil of the object that gets attached to the chicken's foot will only have to pay half damages because it's like the tzroros. Since the object was tied onto the tarnagol's foot, so then therefore not the chicken's owner, but the the owner of the string or the owner of the object that is causing damage is now going to be the responsible party because it was actively tied onto the chicken. So it was turned into a hazard. I think that's what a bor hamaskagel is where you turn something that is not movable into a movable hazard, right? Something that would otherwise just stay, safely in one place. It's not doing anything, and you turn it into something hazardous. That's a bor hamaskagel. Versus Aish is something that just moves along on its own.
So you're assuming that the owner of the strap tied it on.
That's what yeah. Rambam, and that's why the Rambam says Shemashalim Chatzi Nezek HaKosher. That's why the Rambam puts the liability on the one who ties it. O Bal Hadilio, or the owner of the object, or the owner of the string, right? The strap. However, when it comes to the owner of the chicken, ikapatur, there's going to be room for non-liability. The ish bor velo shor bor, because what does it say in the Torah? Ki yiftach ish bor velo yichasenu v'nafal shama shor chamor. That it says in Parshat Mishpatim, ki yiftach ish, that if a person creates a hazard, so then you're going to be liable. Not if the tarnagol, the chicken, or a shore, or not that an animal creates the hazard, right? So once the hazard by someone else is now tied onto the chicken, so now the owner of the chicken is going to be off the hook because it's now his hazard that's causing damage, not my hazard.
Right. Now, why isn't the owner of the strap off the hook as well? Because he didn't tie it. In that case.
In that scenario, he would be off the hook.
Yeah. Right, okay.
In that scenario, he would be. V'hachanami name ish shor v'lo shor shor v'ilu chayev amizagim chadashim shenotzer al yidei memona. Yeah, and then he continues and he says, "Umash kasav Rambam the arihu kabor hamskalkal." Now, what the Rambam writes when he says that it's like a movable hazard, hanurak li yashev heich shayef lechayev bal hadilil lo akosher. He writes that in order to give us clarity as to why the owner of the hazard is the one who's going to be liable here, as opposed to the owner of the chicken.
Why are we focusing on the owner of the hazard instead of on the person who tried it on the chicken?
Yeah.
I think we're assuming they're the same person.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're assuming. We're assuming they're the same person. That's what we're assuming.
Okay.
We're assuming they're the same person.
Okay.
Hanurak liyashiv heich shayach v'hadalo dami lemamed behemus chavero al kamas chavero shehizik nasib. Okay, so basically, what comes out from this Rambam is that the who we view as being liable is going to be dependent on what is causing damage and how it was made. A hazard in the first place, right? If we're talking about just a negligence of the owner of the animal and that the animal just causes it, right? So of course it's going to be put on the owner of the animal. But if there was another intervention that made the chicken gave the chicken the ability to create more havoc, right? By someone tying something onto the chicken's foot, for example. So then the owner of the chicken is not going to be liable in that scenario anymore, but rather it's going to be the owner of the hazard. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of, I was just thinking this, it reminds me of the Mishnah in the beginning of the Masechta. Remember, we saw the Mishnah that said that hechsharti mixas nisko kilu hechsharti kulo, that if I remember the scenario that if someone was digging a pit, right, and then they dug 9 tefachim, and then someone came along and dug the final tefach, the 10th tefach. So who's going to be held accountable in that scenario? The last guy is going to be held accountable, right? So this is very, very similar to that, right? This is that even though, yes, I was negligent with my chicken and he could have done damage. But now it's not him that's causing the damage, not the chicken that's causing damage. It's the It's your hazard that's causing the damage, right? And my chicken is just, has now become an extension of your hazard,
Mhm.
right? Because there was intervention that caused it, as opposed to it just kind of got caught on there, me'elov, right? That's what the Rambam said. That's what he said. But medvar mamurim, what are we talking about when the is there a scenario? What is the scenario according to the Rambam where the owner of the chicken is going to be held accountable?
When he's going his normal way and causes damage.
Yeah, but what about it? But is there ever a scenario where something got caught onto the chicken, and and then that thing causes damage that the owner of the chicken's going to be held accountable?
Well,
Yeah,
if the owner-
If the owner of the chicken ties it,
Yeah.
If the owner of the chicken ties
Right,
it,
that's it.
that would be the only scenario. That would be the only scenario.
Say that again, please.
If the owner of the chicken ties
Ties
something
the
onto the
strap.
chicken, that would be the only time that the owner of the chicken is going to be held accountable for
Really?
damage that the external object does.
Even though he didn't own the strap.
If he, yeah.
Right. It was a strap that belonged to Hefker. It was ownerless.
Strap, why isn't he fully liable?
If the owner again,
If the owner ties the strap on the chicken, why isn't he? fully
because
liable
again, that's a
in the
halach.
same way the
Because
owner-
it's a halach for Moshe Messina.
the
It's a
owner-
because it's like stroros. It's like the pebbles, right? When you have something that's an extension of the body of the animal,
Yeah,
that's an inanimate object, that's an extension of the body of the animal that causes damage, like a yoke or something like that. That's a halacha Moshe Messina. It's a tradition from Har Sinai that it's only half damages.
it must be very similar to a yoke.
What? Yeah, right.
Why is anyone ever liable for full damages?
What do you mean? You would be liable for full damages if you were the owner of the object and you tied it on. You would be liable for full damages because again, it's not because then the focal point changes from the chicken to the object. It's like the chicken became an extension of the hazard, not the other way around.
I see.
That's the chiddush of the Rambam. That's the chiddush of the Rambam. Is how did this hazard come to cause damage? Was it Jordy?
What makes this different, like most halachim from Sinai than any other halacha?
What makes it different is that if it wasn't the halacha of Moshe Sinai, then we would assume he'd have to pay full damages. There would be no reason for us to think not that way.
I'm saying, why can't that be the justification for any tradition? Like, why don't we?
Well, no, it's just because it depends whether or not it's halacha Moshe Sinai. If something is a halacha Moshe Sinai, then it's not open. The Rambam says that means it's not open to dispute.
Rambam knows from his Masor.
What?
Rambam just knows from his Masor that it's.
No, the Gemara will tell us whether or not it's halacha Moshe Sinai. So the Gemara tells us that chatzi chatzi nezik tzoros, that pebbles flying from the feet of the chicken or the feet of the animal is you only pay half damages. How does the Gemara know that? So the Gemara says it's the halacha Moshe Sinai. Yeah. Okay, good. So again, let's just review because this is not simple stuff. This is complicated stuff. This is complicated stuff. So let's make sure we get it down. So again, according to the Rambam, this is the Rosh Hashanah as a whole. Everyone has difficulty with this Rambam, but I think that when you get it, I think he clarifies the sugya in a way that we didn't have before. The Rambam is pointing out that this is going to be that liability is going to be dependent on who is causing this additional damage. Is the cause of this additional damage being done through the owner of the chicken, or is it being done through the owner of the strap? If it's being done through the owner of the chicken, meaning that the owner of the chicken is tying it onto the chicken, and then it causes damage, so then that's a case of chatzi nezek tzoros, you'll pay half damages. If it's a case of the owner of the strap ties it onto the chicken, right? And it goes out and causes damage. So then that's not a case of chati nezik troros. That would be a case of, oh, I'm sorry. He does make it a case of chati nezik troros. But nevertheless, the responsibility is going to be on the owner of the strap, not the chicken, because the chicken became an extension of the strap, not the other way around. That is this major chiddush that comes out of the Rambam.
At the beginning, I missed which Mishnah has the chicken in it.
Oh, the first Mishnah in the second chapter.
Oh, I didn't see it. I must be.
The first Mishnah in the second chapter, yeah.
That's the previous page.
Yeah.
Why did I miss that?
So I just want to ask you, if the owner of the chicken does not tie anything on the chicken causes damage, the owner has to pay full damage because you expect the chicken to break
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah.
But the owner ties something on the chicken, then he only has to pay half damage.
I'm sorry, if the wait, what was the first case you said?
If the owner of the chicken.
Let's say no one ties it.
Yeah.
No one ties it and it just gets caught on the chicken.
No, forget about anything.
There's
being
no
tied,
strap.
just
No strap at all.
Yeah.
And the chicken's just walking around.
And
full
damage
damage.
it.
Then you pay full
That's-
damages.
But if the
'Cause that's
owner ties
expected
something to
damage.
Make it more difficult for the chicken to keep balance and everything, then he only pays half damage.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Again, that could be because it's part of this. That's the
It's
halacha
part of
Moshe
the-
Sinai. Yeah. Halacha Moshe Sinai. Chati nezik troros. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So now I wanted to, in the time we have remaining, let's continue in the parak. Let's get to the next Mishnah. So we are now on the third Mishnah in the second chapter. The third Mishnah in the second chapter is also very, very interesting Mishnah over here. The Mishnah writes the following: Hakelev v'hagedi. If you have a dog or a goat, Shit. a kid, shekavtu mirosh hagag, that jumps off the top of a roof and lands on a vessel or something, v'shibras hakelim, and broke the thing it landed on.
Okay, so first question I have is, Klopsu is they jump. And Shivru is they break.
Yeah, I think because we're talking about two, you have like Kalev
But,
or a Gedi.
Well, it seems like they're both jumping.
Why do you need both cases? Okay, it's a good question. Why do you need both? Why do you need just say either a dog or a one of them? You don't have to say both. Okay, good question. V'shibras hakelim, and it breaks the vessels. Mashalim nezik shalim. You have to pay full damages. Because that's expected. You expect a dog or a kid goat or a kid human to jump.
No, this shows you gotta take care of your kids.
Well, maybe
Yeah,
by
it
kid,
is,
they
yeah.
mean a little child.
No,
Well, a little child will jump
Yeah.
off the roof.
yeah.
No kidding.
So no kidding
And
around.
hold
over
the
here. No
dog
kidding
with
around. And causes yeah. So you expect it to do that. So you're gonna have to pay full damages. Hakelev should not. So I saw that I think the Nemuke Yosef points out that I don't know. It's Pasha from the Gemara this way. It's pointed out by the Sefer Yisa Bracha that he says near the b'diuk nakat hatana mirosh hagag. It explicitly says that it jumped from the top of the roof down and broke something, as opposed to from the ground hopping onto a higher surface and breaking something when it gets up there. Right? It jumps up and lands on something that's on the plateau. Says the Yisa Bracha that he thinks the Mishnah is being specific when it says that it jumps down, because that is more common. It's common for the kid or the dog to jump from a higher surface to down as opposed to jumping up onto something is less common, and therefore perhaps it would not be expected to do that. And then you would only have to pay half damages in such a scenario,
Huh.
right? Because it's not common, right? So there, because of the fact that the Mishnah, it's clear from the Mishnah then that it's specifically a case where it's jumping down, because that's common enough that you'd have to pay full damages. Okay, let's continue. Another case, and this case we're gonna have to discuss in more depth next time. Hakelev shenato charara, v'halach ligdish. A dog picks up a charara. A charara is a like a biscuit, okay, some sort of a roll or something in its mouth, and it goes over to a heap of hay. Achal hacharara v'hidlik hagdish. It eats the biscuit and then lights the heap of hay on fire. Now, how does that happen? Some sort of magic trick. How does that happen? So what happened is that the dog walks over to someone who has a the owner of the, or whoever it is. There's a coal kettle cooking, right? A heap of coals that's cooking, and someone's baking on the coals, and they pick up the biscuit with its mouth, and at the bottom of the biscuit there was a coal attached to it. Okay, this is the way the Gemara explains the case. It was attached to it, and then it walks over to this heap of hay, and it puts down the biscuit. It starts eating the biscuit, and then the whole thing catches on fire. Okay, that's the scenario over here. So ala charara mishalim nezik shalim. When it comes to the biscuit, the dog goes over to and is eating the biscuits. You have to pay for the value of the biscuit that it ate. So it was not the owner's barbecue, someone else's barbecue, and you have to pay for the biscuit that it ate. But on the fire, you only have to pay half damages. Now, why would you only have to pay half damages?
It's not
Because
expected.
it's not part of the biscuit.
It's chatzin nezek troros. It's troros. It's pebbles. It's not part of the animal, right? Again, it's like the pebbles, right? Now it just happened to be a very hazardous pebble. It's a pebble that was, a hot coal that came from the animal and flew off onto fell off onto the heap of hay and caught the whole thing on fire, right? So, and so it's a case of chatzi nezek. So that's what the Bartanura writes. He says, al gedish mishalim chatzi nezek davik motzroros, because it's a case of troros of like the pebbles. The hilchas gemirila, and that's a halacha Moshe Messinai that you only have to pay half damages. You don't have to pay half damages. Yeah. Okay. There is an interesting explanation of the case over here. Why is it that in the second part of the Mishnah, Charlie, it's related to what you're asking before. Why is it not talking about the kid, the goat? It only talks about the dog.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's not something a goat would necessarily do.
Why not? What would be the scenario over here? So presumably, out of this sefer, Bahon Ashir is assuming that that the dog smelled out the biscuits, and when the dog gets hungry, so what does it do? It'll do anything it can to get there. So in this scenario, it like furrowed its way under the fence or something, or just so it can go get the biscuit. Not the nature of a goat to do such a thing. It'd be the nature of a dog to do such a thing. And that's why we're only talking about a dog in this scenario. Okay, what I want to discuss next time though is just coming off of the heels of this Mishnah. There's two things I really want to discuss. I want to discuss Chatzin Nezek Troros a little bit more to understand that conceptually, how and when we apply this halach l'moshe Messinai of chatin ezek tzoros, of the pebbles. You only have to pay half damages when it's not coming from you, because that relates to something that is, let's say, not my koch, but it's kocho de kocho. It was not like through my energy that this happened. It was not my strength that caused this, but I caused something to happen, which causes something else to happen, right? So at what point do we say it's domino effect and therefore I'm responsible the whole way through, right? Or do we apply chatzin ezek tzoros, and that it is separate from my action, that the point that I'd only have to pay half damages, okay? That also relates to, how do we treat arson, right? Or not how do we treat arson, but how do we treat arrows, guns, weaponry, where again, I pull the trigger, which then through a mechanism causes a bullet to fly, that then causes damage, right? I pull back on a bow and it causes then an arrow to fly forward, right? So how are we magdir that? Because if we're going to say that it is, let's say my mammon, my property, then it's no different than like my animals. And if it's like my animals, so then it should be like a case of chatzin ezek tzoros. But if we say it's like arson, it's like aish, it's fire. Well, that's the nature of fire, is that it continues to move on its own. It continues to go on its own, right? So this relates to this whole question of how do we treat weaponry and the like that through a mechanism, through mechanics, I do one thing and then it causes something else to happen, which causes something else to happen. So how do we treat that in halacha? So that's what I want to discuss next time.
That topic comes up with people who have electric scooters and they're handicapped and they want to use them on Shabbos.
Yes, yeah, it comes up there. Grama. It also comes up. I'll tell you a very interesting question that comes up related to Hilchos Shabbos as well in this context, a little bit different, but in the same general topic, is what gives us the right to light Shabbos candles. If we treat fire like it's constant, my action is throughout the length of the arson taking place, so then it's like I'm lighting a fire on Shabbos, right? I light candles before Shabbos, is like it continues on Shabbos. The Nemuka Yosef asked that question, right? So what would give somebody the right to light Shabbos candles, right? So there's a lot to discuss in this topic of chatzin ezek tzoros, of ishom mishum chetzio, of koach de gavra. There's a lot that needs to be discussed. Okay, good. We'll stop here for now. Shkaya, guys.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Harvey.
Oh, take care.